So good evening and welcome to a special Black History Month event sponsored by Carleton University School of Journalism and Communication. We are coming to you live from the unceded territory of the Algonquin. My name is Adrian Harewood and I'm a professor in the School of Journalism and Communication, and I'm honored and delighted to be serving as your host for this evening's event featuring Makda Ghebreslassie, CBC's correspondent in Washington, D.C. Tonight's event would not have happened without the support of several people, including the School of Journalism's director, Alan Thompson, Jenna Lind Smith as well. I'd also like to thank my faculty colleagues and students for their support, and of course, the Faculty of Public Affairs. This event is happening at a particularly fraught moment in the history of the city of Ottawa. Today, the city's first Black police chief, Peter Slowly, resigned. It is day 19 of an unprecedented occupation of the capital by a convoy of truckers that is challenging the political leadership of this city and this country in some fundamental ways. The city of Ottawa is on edge. Canadians from coast to coast to coast have been riveted by what they've been witnessing on their TV screens, smartphones, and hearing on the radio. Some have found the images horrifying, others are cheering it on. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say, though, that the next few days, weeks, and months could be pivotal in determining the future of democracy. It is in moments like these that we remember the value of journalism, the role it plays in keeping people informed, asking critical questions, scrutinizing our leaders and institutions, and opening spaces for conversation, putting stories into context. We need journalists and journalism now more than ever before. We need journalists who are steady and who are always keeping their eyes on the prize. And Makda Ghebreslassie has been a model journalist who has been keeping her eyes on the prize for her entire career. Makda is the Sudanese-born child of Eritrean parents who has won praise for her ability to reach into communities and make connections. Makda has been a video journalist, a news anchor, a news reader, and a reporter. She has appeared on such programs as Here and Now, Fresh Air, and of course, Marketplace, and has worked in newsrooms in Sudbury, Sault Ste. Marie, Windsor, and Toronto before joining CBC's Washington team last summer. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Makda Ghebreslassie to Carleton University and the School of Journalism and Communication. Makda, welcome. It's great to see you.
Thank you so much. It's great to see you too.
So Makda, I know that you're going to get us started. Our theme today is keeping our eyes on the prize. And I referenced that you have been keeping your eyes on the prize for quite a long time.
Yeah, I have. But you know, when you think of my career in journalism, if you thought of it as a race, I would say that I was the one that got the late start and took the long way around, while keeping my eye on the prize. So, and I say that because I didn't actually have my first job in news until I was 28, and I'm creeping up on 42 now. So that's around the corner. And so I was late in the game. And part of that had to do with the fact that even though I had news surrounding me in my life, news was very important to my parents. It was always on. They always made sure that we were watching with them. So when it came to local news, national news, international news, the remote was being changed from City TV to CBC's national news to the BBC. So it was always on. It was always important to stay plugged in and stay informed. But I never, as a kid, ever even considered this as a career. It never entered my mind. And I went to university for psychology and sociology. I wanted to be a counselor. I graduated and could not get a job in the first few months. And I thought I would gain some experience by volunteering. So I volunteered at a crisis line for almost 10 months. And there I was talking to people a lot of times, essentially at the worst moments in their lives, when they maybe had nobody else to turn to. And there were several times that I had to talk people down from taking their lives. And after doing that for quite some time, it really took a toll on me. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I left that. I didn't know career-wise what was going to be next for me. And my friend Liz is the one who kind of saved the day for me career-wise, because she actually graduated with a master's in journalism. And there were several friends around me who went to school for journalism. And she called me up one day at 11 o'clock at night, and she said she'd seen this commercial for a show called Girls TV on YTV, and they were looking for 2 new hosts that were friends. This show had been on for a while, but they were looking for 2 new hosts. It's going to be a competition across the country, and she thought, let's enter this, let's do this. And I thought, okay, it'll be fun. It's an experience. And so we do this show, and the first day that I have to do an interview, I've never done an interview in my life. I was interviewing a monster truck driver during the monster truck event in Toronto. And I was talking to him about, what made him become a monster truck driver, what drew him to that, why is it that audiences are coming out to watch this happen. It was a conversation. It was an interview, it was a conversation. And during that time, something just clicked, something just felt right to me. And that would be the beginning. And from there, that was just, we did that for 1 season. But after that, I was looking for more opportunities, volunteer opportunities to learn more. And I wrote a column, I pitched a column and wrote a column for 180 News, which was a youth paper in Ontario. And I called it Future Fittings. And I interviewed young people, high school students, and I believe also students of college who were doing co-op programs or internships, trying to figure out what they wanted to do when they grew up. And so I would interview them while they were doing that. I would talk to professionals in those industries as well, and I'd write this column. And then I also decided to volunteer as a reporter at Rogers TV. And I did that first as a reporter and then as a host with one of their programs. And I did that for about 2.5 years. And then part way is when I realized, okay, great, all this volunteer experience is great, but I should probably go back to school. I need some education in this. And so I went to, Seneca has a post-grad program, journalism program, and I took that program, and this is where I learned the craft of storytelling, what makes for a good story, the editorial aspects, the technical aspects of it as well, how to shoot, how to edit, how to package a story, how to do it for TV, how to do it for radio. And this was a jam-packed program. And afterwards, I felt prepared to finally go out there and get a job in news. And it happened within a few months. And I was, as I said, 28. I got my first job in Sudbury with a community news station there. And I was there for 1.5 years. Sudbury is a mining town. And I, got into the community, met people in the community, was a part of different things. I was there for 1.5 years before I felt like it was time to move on. And I'll just say, as I was starting out my career, I did have 3 long-term goals. And one was to eventually get into the CBC. That was a goal of mine. The second one was to come back home to Toronto and work in Toronto at some point. And the third was, at some point, I wanted to try long format journalism. So that's what I went into this career thinking about, down the line. And so when I did my 1.5 years in Sudbury, I then moved on and worked for CTV in Sault Ste. Marie, a place that I still say is my happy place. I really loved my time there, and was friends with a lot of people from the community, and not just journalists. That's really important, is that you are making connections with people that live in the community, that grew up in the community. And I did that. I did that by joining the Vagina Monologues play and being a part of that cast, taking a sewing class, going to a poetry writing session. All those things are what allows you to make connections in the community. And from those connections, you get to tell stories. You get to find those stories and you get to tell them. So I was there for 2 years, and then it was time to cross off that first goal, which was getting into the CBC. And I did that by joining the CBC Windsor team. I was there for 3 years. I got to tell a lot of big stories, a lot of them having to do with the auto industry. When Heinz pulled out, their production from Leamington, which is just outside of Windsor, after being there for 100 years, I was the one that got to cover that story. When Detroit filed for bankruptcy, I was the one that got to cover that story for News Network. And so I got to do a lot while I was in Windsor. And I was same thing. I was a VJ there as well. So I was shooting, I was editing, I was on the radio, and yeah, there were plenty of opportunities. And after 3 years, it was time to kind of go to the next long-term goal, which was get back to Toronto. And so after 3 years in Windsor, I made it back to Toronto. I worked with in the local Toronto newsroom, with the TV, radio, eventually web as well. And that was important to me to come back home and do the job that I love with, in the community that I grew up in. And I can tell you, my parents were thrilled to have me back and to be able to tune into the news at 6 o'clock and see me every day. So that was a great honor for me to do that. And I was with Toronto Local for 3 years before I moved on to Marketplace to fill in a mat leave job. And that was that third goal of being able to do long format journalism. And I was with the team for 2 years. We did great work. And then everything that has come after that, I've had so many opportunities that have come. Everything's been gravy. I got to, continue on with the network, filing to the National, filing to World at 6. And as you said, now I'm here in Washington. I've been here since September as a foreign correspondent. And I can tell you, I never dreamed that this could happen, that I would be in this position. So throughout my career, I had my eye on the prize, but I had no way of knowing how much bigger the prize would be the closer I got to it.
You said a lot there, and I want to go back a little bit, because we were talking last night, I think, and we were talking about the fact that both of us have worked with young people, and I worked as a youth worker, and you worked, of course, as a counselor, and I, that experience is one of the most gratifying experiences that I've ever had in my life, working with high school students for a number of years. I'm curious, though, as to what you learned from that experience of being a counselor and how you've used it in your own journalistic practice. How has that experience informed the kind of journalist that you are?
So I was actually, when we spoke of counseling, I was a peer mediator when I was in high school. So that was what informed my decision going into university and thinking that I wanted to be a counselor. And then when I was on the, volunteering on the crisis line, I was speaking to people of all ages that were calling in and asking for help. Being on Girls TV, our audience is a young audience. And I can tell you that I didn't understand how the kids, really, they're preteens, young teenagers that were our target audience, and we would go out into the community not thinking anything, and a group of girls would be like screaming and so excited to see us, and it meant something, and we would be at different events and they would want our autograph, and that surprised me. And I, knowing that young people are watching, they're watching every move, they're looking up to you, they're learning from you. And so it's important, whether you're working with young people or what we do, we work in news, everybody is watching. I was watching as a kid when my parents had the news on, and it had an impact. It kept me informed as I grew up. So it's important that we stay connected, and that we pull the younger audience into what we're doing with our storytelling, and make sure that they're watching.
I've watched you closely over the last number of years, and one thing that you do very well is, I think, you listen. It always looks as if you're connected to the subject, and I'm wondering if being a counselor helps in that, having been a counselor.
Yeah, being on the phone, being on the phone and taking those calls. I don't want to call myself a counselor because I was a volunteer.
Right. Once you know, right.
You're you're taking these calls, and that's the most important thing. That's what you were told. You are there to listen. You are not there to fix their problems. You are there to hear them, to let them know that you're hearing them, to validate what they're saying, and that's why people are reaching out on those lines, because they just need to be heard. And that's true as well for what we do. We need to make sure that we're listening, not only just so that we can get more information and follow up, but it's that connection, right? And I think people can tell when you're not listening, and when you're just kind of checking off the questions and going one after another. Those real moments in storytelling are found in the moments when you are listening and you are connecting and you are following up with questions that make sense because you are in the moment.
Mhm. You mentioned that Sault Ste. Marie, the Sioux, is your happy place. You also referenced the fact that you've worked in other smaller markets, markets like Windsor and also Sudbury. What is that experience of working in a small market? What has that taught you? What are the lessons that you've learned from that experience?
That is the best training ground for every journalist. I've always, anytime I'm asked about, what someone should do coming out of J school, that has always been my first advice: is get out of your market. So if you're from Toronto, leave Toronto. Go to smaller markets, because it's in those markets that you are going to learn your biggest lessons. You are going to have every opportunity to tell the biggest stories that you wouldn't get to do if you stayed in Toronto. When you are in a smaller market, it is all up to you. It doesn't matter what the story is, you're the one that's covering it. So you really do learn some tough lessons, and you're going to trip, and you will make mistakes sometimes, but that's how you learn. And so I always tell people, go to those smaller markets, get in with the community. Don't just stay with your other journalists. Actually be a part of that community, join different groups, go to the gym, participate in different events, because that's how you're going to meet people from the community. That's how you are going to find those stories that need to be told. And though that's my favorite time of my career, I can honestly say that those years in the smaller markets were the best for me. I enjoyed that time. They were tough. I learned a lot, and it got me here. So that's my advice for anyone starting out: leave where you're from and just go out into those smaller markets.
Mhm. When we look at you on TV, when you look at you, when we look at you in Washington, D.C., you always come across as being poised. You always come across as being cool as a cucumber. You come across as being, just kind of comfortable, and you seem unflappable. Live TV, for anyone who hasn't done live TV, can be a scary experience. You've had quite the journey. I'm not sure if you've always been, cool and unflappable, but I was wondering if you could maybe reflect on a couple of your most mortifying moments in
Yeah.
doing live television in your own history.
Oh gosh, yeah. Everybody has them,
Mm.
and I always, I hope they happened early enough that they're not out there somewhere. But one of my first experiences that I, oh gosh, I cringe when I think about it, is I had just arrived in Windsor a few months before, and this was now, I was getting the opportunity to do my first news network hit. And it had to do around Windsor Chrysler workers and a crucial vote having to do with a strike vote or strike mandate. And there would be a decision or announced later in the evening. So I was supposed to stick around and file to News Network at 1 o'clock in the morning, because Ian Mansing was hosting the show out of Vancouver. So I would stay till 1 o'clock and do this hit, which was plenty of time for me to work myself up and into a ball of nerves waiting for that hit. And so it was me and the director who was in the booth. And 1 o'clock comes around. Ian is talking to me, throws to me. I do this hit, and it is a rambling mess. rambling mess. And once you start, it's hard to get out of it. So it felt like it just went on forever. And at the end of it, he, sign off. I get off from my chair. I hit the ground. I'm just in a ball on the ground, mortified. The director comes out and he's trying to be nice, and he's like, it's okay, it wasn't that bad, it'll be okay. It wasn't okay. In that moment, I thought, that's it. Like, they are never going to have me on again. That was the worst hit. I'm never going to be asked to do another News Network hit. And, here I am. It was a few months into being there at Windsor, and I felt like a total screw up. And so, yeah, I wasn't on News Network for a while.
How did you deal with that afterwards? Because, psychologically, that can be damaging. It can be tough. So how did you get out of it? How did you kind of, muster up your courage and go back in front of that camera?
You have a job to do, right? It's not like you can hide away and stay in bed. You have a job to do. I had to come back the next day and the next day and the next day. And I just had to hope that I would get better at it. And I would be able to control the nerves. And the next time I had to do anything that was going to be played nationally, I would be prepared. And I hoped that I would have another chance. I never heard anything from anyone. I didn't get a note or criticism. Nobody said anything. It was all me. And so it was going to be up to me to make sure to change that narrative and to do better the next time. And I think it was probably a year or a little less than that before I was back on News Network. But then again, it all changed, and I was able to do, as I said, when Detroit filed for bankruptcy, I did the hit for News Network. And so those opportunities came. You learn from them, you grow from them, and it all worked out in the end. So it was okay.
And you encountered Ian Mansing, like what, a year or two later? Can you tell us about that encounter?
Yeah, okay, so this was when I came to Toronto. I was nominated with my team for a CSA award, and that was the year
Canadian Screen Award. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. And I believe that was the year that he won for Best Anchor. I think that was the year. And so I was going over to say hello and to congratulate him. And in my head, I always just thought he's gonna remember me as, the girl who just messed up and rambled. And but I went ahead, and it was at the same time I was being mentored by Adrian Arsenault at the time. And so I walk over, I say hello to Ian, and before I can say anything, he says, "You know what? I've been watching your work, and you're doing a really great job." And I'm stunned. Adrian was right beside him, and she just kind of went like this. She's like, see, listen to him. And all this time I'm thinking, that one hit must be in his memory, and that's all he knows of me, and that's all he thinks of me. And yet here he is, so kind to say that he's been watching my work, and he thinks I'm doing a good job. And we never actually, I never brought up that hit to him. I never talked about it, and I wonder, maybe he forgot, which would be great if that's the case.
Do you have, when you're getting ready for a live hit from Washington or anywhere really, do you have a routine? Like how do you get ready for it? How do you get prepared for that moment?
There's a routine. It depends on whether you're doing the hit from studio or you're live on location and there's something going on in the background. In studio with what I'm doing right now, I'm doing Newsnet hits and World Report in the morning. And so I try to get up by 3:45.
3:45 every day.
Yeah, because I'm on the phone. I'm getting emails right at 4 o'clock. So we're going back and forth at 4 a.m. about what I could possibly cover. So there's a bit of back and forth and a discussion on, we're thinking this, and what do you think? Is there something else we should be doing? And so that happens around 4 a.m. And my first hit is with World Report that airs at 7 o'clock. So what I'm doing in between there is, once we've decided what the story is going to be, I'm doing my research. I am looking up articles. I'm looking at clips that may be out there that I could use to write around the piece, and you're putting it together, and then before you go. So there's a lot of preparation underway. Like for radio, obviously, I'm not, hair and makeup doesn't matter for radio. So the first hit is just about, get to the story, get it right, and get ready to go. And then after that is done, then I focus on my news network hit and, getting ready for that.
Mhm, mhm. I wanted to talk about, becoming a foreign correspondent, and whether this was something that you were at all thinking about. I can remember in last summer when it was announced that you were going to be the correspondent. Everyone was so pleased. Everyone was so happy for you. But I was wondering, was this something that you were at a certain point maybe gunning for? Like, how did that come about?
No, no, because as I said, my goal was always to come back to Toronto and work in Toronto. And whether that was with the local newsroom or the national newsroom, that was my goal. I wanted to come back to Toronto. And so once that happened, I didn't see myself going anywhere. Not it would be fun for going off for a story and then coming back, but I didn't see myself picking up my life and moving somewhere and being a foreign correspondent. That wasn't in my head at all. And then what changed is I was asked to go and cover the Derek Chauvin trial. Where the verdict coming, and they wanted me to go down to Minneapolis and cover it. And I remember being scared to do this story because it was so huge. What the murder of George Floyd, everybody was affected by this. It sparked protests around the world. There was outrage everywhere. And so what was going to happen at this trial and the verdict that came out of it, everybody would be watching. And I wanted to be sure that I could do a good job. I didn't want to disappoint. Imposter syndrome is real. and there are, the further along you are in this career, I find there's more fear associated because you really want to get it right, and you really want to do it justice, and you want to make sure that you present the story and you are connecting with the audience and you do a good job. I just wanted to do a good job, and I didn't want to screw up, and I didn't, especially at this point. And so there was a bit of fear associated with that. But I knew I was going to say yes. Absolutely. Like I knew I was going to say yes, but it was a matter of just getting past that fear. And so
it's important to embrace fear. Then it's important to kind of just go with it, like embrace being uncomfortable.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. If you don't, then you're going to be stuck and you will regret it, and you will miss out on amazing opportunities and moments that you could shine in, and you'd have no idea of knowing. Right? If I said no, none of this would have happened. I would not be here right now. And I probably would have missed out on other opportunities as well. So somehow you do have to push past that fear. It's worth it. It's just getting through it initially.
And also, you're saying that you were scared, but the truth is, and I watched you report from Minnesota, you were ready. You were prepared. You've been preparing for that moment for many years.
Yeah, I was ready. And there have been different moments across my career where it's like the make it or break it moment, where you have to perform, and if you perform, this is going to be the moment that will change things for you. This will be the moment that will open the next door, that will offer up the next opportunity. So you have to bring it. And there have been, I would say, probably 2 or 3 moments like that in my career. And with a little luck and preparation and support from different people in my life, they all worked out. Those moments, I was able to do my job and do them well, and it got me to the next thing.
Mm-hmm. You, of course, are a Black journalist, a Black foreign correspondent, and I'm wondering, with that, if that fact, do you feel a particular kind of responsibility? to community? Like, does that something, is that something that you think about, in your kind of daily work, that they're people who are maybe cheering for you, or people who are expecting things of you, or people who want things for you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm not in this job I'm not in this job alone. I feel like there are many more people that are behind me, that are rooting for me to do well, that look at me as an example for possibly their own children, and what this could mean for the future of journalism, and who can be in those seats and in front of the cameras and in the decision making rooms. There is a responsibility, absolutely, and I've been aware of that from the beginning. But you embrace that. I think that's a great thing, to know that you have so many people who want you to do well. So uh, I accept that responsibility. I have had moments in my life where different people have reached out and asked to have a conversation about journalism, and they've wanted to go in. Other young Black journalists that want to have a conversation about how to do this and what's next, and how do they, progress in this field. So I think that's great that I've been able to get to this point. And if there's anything that I can share with future journalists, young Black journalists, then I'd love to have those opportunities and pass that on.
Yeah, it was clear to me in watching you report from Minnesota that you were bringing a little something, to quote Maxwell. You were bringing something a little different to the table. It seemed as if maybe you were asking different questions, and maybe there was a certain kind of knowingness. Is that the case? Like, what do you think Makda Ghebreslassie brought to that story that took place, of course, in Minneapolis, Minnesota?
Everything about our lived experiences we bring to this. It is a good thing to have lived experiences. And I think that absolutely, just being in the crowd and seeing a Black journalist, there for sure were people there that connected with me because of that, and wanted to speak to me and wanted to share their stories, and had a sense of, feeling like I would understand. We could have a conversation and I would understand. So I think that's what I brought to it. We had so many just real moments, real conversations, painful ones, where you see the emotion on different people's faces, and they were sharing it, and they were vulnerable. And I think that's what I brought to it, is that connection.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I know that has been a seminal, it was a seminal moment for you. You've referenced that already, but last night I think we were talking about the fact that, for you, when you heard the verdict, and then you were delivering your hit, you kind of realized your purpose, right? Like you kind of you understood that this was something really meaningful, and you were in the right place.
Yeah. Yeah, that moment, I can feel it, because it just before the verdict was announced, there's so many people outside the courthouse, and just before, it was so silent. It was like, I may have said this before, but it felt like everybody collectively was holding their breath, and there was this moment of suspension, and then you heard the verdict, and there was this explosion of emotion, and I just remember thinking, wow, like I'm here in that moment to relay to everybody at home what that moment meant, what it was like, what it sounded like, what it felt like, what it meant. And that was just, yeah, that was just a really big moment for me, where I realized the importance of me being there to tell this story. And yeah, it was a big moment.
That was a very human moment. The George Floyd murder is something that has touched people around the world, and it touched people in a very kind of visceral way.
Yeah.
There was a rawness about it, and I'm wondering, when you're telling that kind of story, is it okay? Is it appropriate to convey your own feelings about what has happened in that particular moment, given the uniqueness of this particular story? Are you able to kind of communicate that? Was that something that you tried to do, like that emotional response that I'm sure maybe you had as well?
Yeah, I think I tried to do it. I think I did, and then I don't know if I succeeded, but yeah, there is a way to do it. I think there's a way to do it without, you find the balance. I think you find the balance. And how how could I not? How could I not explain the emotion and the feeling when you were in the middle of it?
And yet some people would say, Makda Ghebreslassie, part of your job is to be dispassionate.
Mhm.
You're not supposed to show your emotional connection to the story. You're supposed to be somewhat detached. At least that's what some people would argue. What would you how would you respond to that?
I think it's not that. I mean, I think we're taught that along the way, that you're supposed to be detached from all of these stories. But even there are other stories where you do connect with the person you're interviewing, where there's something horrible that's happened to them, and you're having that moment and that connection, and that is what draws out uh you know the draws them out and allows them to be vulnerable, and that's what adds to the story. That's what gives us a true sense of what's going on. So I think you can be human. You can be human without becoming the story, you know.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. I'm curious as to what it means to be in Washington, D.C., the most powerful capital city in the world at this moment in history. Like, what's it like? Is there a buzz in the city? Like, just describe to us what it's like being there on a daily basis.
Yeah, it felt like I was here in July to a little bit of August, filling in for a month first before I actually moved here in September. And I remember that month, I felt like I was in a movie. You felt like, walking around, you feel like you're on a movie set because you've seen all of these buildings and all the movies and all the shows. And, when the motorcade is coming and you hear the sirens and you're standing there, it's a surreal moment to realize, oh, okay, well, there goes president and the vice president in those vehicles. And this is something I've seen, time and time again on different shows, on Scandal or whatever it may be. So it was kind of, it was trippy to the first little while to get used to that, and to all these buildings that you recognize, and to be standing in front of them. Yeah, that took a while, and to be eavesdropping on conversations, because one of my favorite things is to do that, whether it's at the coffee shop or you're walking around, you hear little bits of conversations, and the kind of conversations people are having on the phone about, million, multi-million dollar contracts, or this bill or that. It's interesting. Yeah, it's a lot. And this city, Washington, was much more open than Toronto. So that was also that was an adjustment coming here, because everybody, the restaurants are open, everybody's moving around, and at first that took a while to feel comfortable. But yeah, it's a pretty cool city.
The irony is that you never imagined yourself in the United States. You weren't particularly fond of it.
Well, I have family here, in different parts, and there were times where I felt like going across the border, you almost had to put an armor on. And we had, there were a couple of situations that we had when we were down here, and so yeah, I couldn't picture myself living here. And my career is an example of never say never. Never say never. There's so much that I've been able to do, and so many opportunities that have come my way that I couldn't have pictured for myself, that I could not have imagined, that I maybe didn't think I would be good enough for, and then they come, and it's an amazing experience. And I'm so glad that it worked out the way it did, because I really would have missed out.
And so what do you know about the United States of America now that you didn't know before July 2021? What have you learned about the society in which you're living?
I mean, I think I'm still learning. I think when it comes to paying attention to the politics down here and watching the different hearings and the different investigations, we get a snippet in Canada. Obviously, we plug in and out of American news, but I think I'm amazed by sort of the back and forth of some of the conversations, the way um, people address each other. I think we know that there is a real division, a real divide here, and it'll be interesting to see what happens as we move towards the midterms later this year. So I feel like I'm 6 months in, and I think it will take 2 years or more to really feel like I have a real sense of how things work, and really get a grip on everything down here.
The United States at this moment seems like a country that is at war with itself. It seems increasingly polarized. How does that manifest itself in the DC that you live in? Like what are you noticing about the increasing, I think what many observers would say, polarization of the society?
Well, I mean, I don't know that you see it in DC proper, right? I think you have a better sense of that when you get out of DC and move into a lot of the other states, and we see it. We see it with for example, the abortion rights is constantly back in the news now, and we see that divide outside the Supreme Court. But more so, obviously, you're experiencing that in Texas and other states. So I feel like when it comes to getting a real sense of the division in this country, you have to move out of DC proper, and that's something I haven't had a chance to do since I've been here. I haven't had a chance to leave DC as my hits have been stationed here. But that's something I'm looking forward to doing, is moving out and covering the stories that are important across the U.S. and the differing opinions that we need to show and include in our coverage.
Mm-hmm. You are watching, of course, a conversation between me. My name is Adrian Harwood, and our guest this evening is Makda Ghebreslassie. She is CBC's correspondent, foreign correspondent in Washington, D.C. She's been in the post now for some 6 months, and I will say, has been doing a fabulous job. Another question about the United States. What's the biggest misconception that you had about the United States that maybe you've been disabused of in the last couple of months? Or maybe there isn't any.
This misconception. Huh.
It's a tough question.
Yeah. I think I have to give that one some thought.
Okay. Yeah. No problem. No problem. I want to remind people that you can participate in this conversation by feeding us some questions. We'd love to get your questions. We'd love to get your comments. You can just go to the Q&A section, and you can write any question that you'd like. I'm just going to go to this right now because I think there's one question here. And the question says, a question from Makda. At the start of your journalist career, like I am right now, how did you know when to accept any job in the industry versus availing yourself for opportunities that coincide with your dream position? I find that if I'm not close to the exact journalism role that I want, I feel like I'm wasting my time. Have you experienced this, and how do you deal with it?
I didn't have a lot of offers coming at one time in the beginning. Let me just say, I was applying everywhere and not hearing anything for a few months. So when the Sudbury position came up, I was on that right away. Interestingly enough, though, as soon as I said yes to Sudbury, I was there, getting training that week, and all of a sudden, I'm getting calls for other jobs, and it's too late at that point. But I mean, early on, I think it's if you get an opportunity to work in a newsroom in a smaller market and maybe it's not what you think it is, I would say give it a shot because you really don't know what what it's all about. You may have your own opinions and thoughts about what it might be to work in that newsroom or to work in that town or to work in that city, but you really don't know. And I can say that from experience because after the Sudbury job, when I got the CTV job, I had assumed it was going to be in Sudbury. So I didn't think I was going to be moving. And then I was told, no, it's actually in Sault Ste. Marie, which was further from Toronto and what I thought was further, stepping further away from my goal, which was get back to Toronto, work in Toronto, get to CBC. And so I was nervous about that. I was afraid. I was a mess the day before I moved to Sault Ste. Marie, and I remember telling my friend, "What am I doing? Like this makes no sense. This is not what I planned. This is moving even further away. How is this going to get me where I need to go?" And boy, was I wrong. It turned out to be the best experience of my life. Like I say, Sault Ste. Marie, I consider to be my happy place, and I just think about what would have happened if I said no. the all the experiences that I had there, I would have missed out on because I thought I knew what I was doing and I thought this wasn't part of the plan and this wasn't going to get me where I needed to go, but it turned out it was, and it was the best thing I did. So I think push past your initial thoughts or your fears and say yes and give it a try.
Mhm.
Get to know that town, that newsroom, whatever it may be that's offering you this opportunity.
I do want to reference a question that one of our audience members posed. And I think you kind of answered the question, but maybe I'm going to kind of dig a little bit deeper because the question is, as a Black journalist who has gone to smaller communities, have you ever felt fear of racially charged encounters at working in those smaller communities? And if so, what did you do to overcome it?
Yeah, so fear, a little bit of anxiety. I'd say anxiety more than fear because I knew I was going into communities that weren't very diverse. And so, yeah, absolutely that entered my mind. And I did have a couple of situations, one in Sudbury and one in the Sioux. Uh, there was a situation where I was at a restaurant in Sudbury and there was a woman that clearly had too much to drink and she wanted to pick a fight with my friend and stood up for my friend and she called me. I can't remember if it was a gorilla or an ape, but she threw that out there and so we decided, the restaurant unfortunately didn't know what to do. I think we were dealing with a young waiter, and so we decided to leave, and that was the first time that happened. And yeah, I was obviously I was upset, um, but I didn't have any other situations like that in my year and a half in Sudbury, and I didn't, you know, I didn't want that one situation to color my experience of being there because everything else was so great. The coworkers I had, the stories I was able to tell, the people that I was meeting, I enjoyed my time in Sudbury. So I did, but I did have that one situation, and of course, it's never fun when something like that happens. And then Sault Ste. Marie, I always say it's my happy place. I loved my time there. I had a situation with one person at a gym who decided to throw the N-word my way. And I remember in the moment, there were other people around and there was just this still moment where everybody, you could tell everybody just kind of froze and I froze for a second. And then I dropped my weights and I went to the receptionist area and told them what happened. And they asked for a description of who it was. I told them, and turned out he'd also, said something to another woman that was in there at the gym, and she had complained as well. So management called me, I think the next day or so, to let me know that they had banned him from the gym, and they handled it. And that was one moment of time, a bad situation. And unfortunately, it's going to happen. And it doesn't matter whether you're in a small market or a major market, it is going to happen. And I hate to say that. And you just have to, I don't know, it's almost like you prepare yourself that it might happen. You hope that when you bring attention to it, that it's handled properly. And in that situation, it was handled properly. And you do your job. And I did not let that one person affect the way that I interacted with people in the community, affect the experiences that I had. I enjoyed my time at the Sioux, and that was just one moment, one person that wasn't going to take that experience away from me.
Makda, this is another question about safety. The other week, a student communicated with me, and the student said effectively that they have been watching what's been going on in Ottawa. They've watched some of these encounters between members of the public and journalists. And this person, has really been affected by it. The person's in the journalism program, and the person was saying, I'm not sure, just given how unsafe it seems to be in this particular moment for journalists, I'm not sure if this is something I can do. Like, I'm not sure if I can deal with people harassing me in the way in which I see some of our journalists being harassed, the kind of epithets that are thrown at them. What would you say to that student? What would you say that he was saying, I'm not sure if this profession is for me?
Isn't that heartbreaking to hear that we could be losing great future journalists because of what's happening, because of how journalists today are being treated at some of these, events. That's scary. And I understand it. Because if you're starting out in this, and this is what you're watching, and this is how journalists are being treated, then why are you going to want to put yourself in that situation? I understand it.
So understanding what, like, knowing that it's a reality, that journalists do face these kinds of attacks on a daily basis. Why do you still do it? Like, why are you still in this business that many people now consider to be unsafe?
Because it matters. What we do matters. Telling the stories and informing the public and connecting with people, all of that matters. And you do get the other side. You do get the people that reach out to you and let you know that they really like that story that you did, and it really helped them in a certain way, and they were able to, they got some information out of it that helped them in some way, whether it's health wise or work wise or money wise or whatever it is in their life. You get that as well. And unfortunately, right now you're seeing the ugly side of it highlighted, but I promise you that there is that other side where people reach out to you to let you know that what you do matters. And so for that person, I really hope you stick through this, and I really hope you stay because you want to. If you're passionate about journalism, I hope you stay with it, and I hope that things change around us.
Practically speaking, what are some steps that you have taken, or that you take, I guess, on a regular basis to protect yourself? What are some things that you do, and what are some things that you don't do in order to remain as safe and secure as possible?
Well, I want to be clear. I don't feel like I'm in danger every day, and I don't feel like I'm in danger with every story. It depends on the story you're in. You have to be prepared, obviously, and we're all trained for how to move around in large crowds, how to put yourself in a position that maybe is a little bit safer. We're trained to stay together. On those bigger stories, usually you're with a camera person, you might have a producer, and you might have a security person with you. So there is a lot of a lot of conversations that go around getting prepared for that stuff, and having the right equipment if things go wrong with you as well. So it it's not a daily thing. It's not an everyday thing, but on these bigger stories, absolutely, it's a safety is an ongoing conversation, and you have to be mindful. You have to be observant of what's happening around you while also still doing your job. So yeah, you are constantly just looking around and checking your back, and there are things, I saw videos of people with the trucker convoy talking, showing reporters doing their report, and then making and saying, oh look, they're not trying to show the how big the crowd is. What they don't understand is, when you are trying to tell a story, sometimes in those big crowds, then you have people preventing you from telling the story, presenting the facts, and coming in front of the camera. So what we'll do sometimes is we will get footage of the big crowd, and then when it comes to going live, we might go off to the side a little bit so that we can go live on camera, and then the footage of how big the crowd is being played over what we're saying, so the audience gets a view and a sense of how big the crowd is and what's actually going on. But for safety reasons, and to ensure that we can do our job and actually tell the story and present the facts without anybody getting in the way and preventing us from doing that, we might turn to the side for a bit and do that for that reason. So sometimes people are watching us do our job and assuming things and not understanding what we're trying to do, and that we're actually trying to tell the story and trying to tell all sides and present the facts. But we need to be able to do that uninterrupted, and we can show how big the crowd is or whatnot with our footage, as you hear our voice on camera, but the footage is being shown that we filmed just before that point.
You said that there was something there that you said that I found interesting. You said that you strive to cover all sides. And the question is, do all sides necessarily deserve to have their story told?
I think that we need to have informed opinions. Absolutely, you have to tell the side, the two, whether it's the two sides that have gotten us to that point. But I think it's important that we highlight informed opinions and science and facts, and that needs to be in the forefront. That is important, that we understand that that's what should be in the spotlight, and that's what we need to get across, because there are there's so much disinformation out there, and everyone is trying their best to get to kind of work their way through that, to get to the truth, to get to the facts, to present the science. And it's a tough time right now. It really is.
Yeah. There's another question from the audience, and the question is this: has there ever been a moment during your time at CBC or during your volunteer positions where you felt like quitting or felt like journalism was not for you? And if so, how did you overcome that feeling?
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
Can you maybe share us, give us an example of that one moment?
yeah, it can be hard. I think we had this conversation about, I'm a woman in this industry who started in this industry very late, and absolutely my career has been my priority. But there were other things I wanted to do too. I wanted to have a family and I wanted to have kids, and I didn't put any sort of focus or attention on that. And my career was really the priority, and moving from one region to another and just kind of pushing forward and achieving my goals. But there's a price to pay. It's hard to do this job. It's hard to be in journalism as a woman at my age, if you are, if you want to have a family and still keep doing what you're doing. Balancing that is hard. I have friends who have children and are in journalism, and I always tell them, like, I don't know how you guys are doing this. I don't know when they sleep. The pressure is intense, and they've got so much more on their plate. So yeah, there have been times where I questioned, did I do the right thing? Could I have done this differently? Where I could have made, my career a priority while also putting more into trying to meet somebody. Yeah, I think about that all the time. And
Is it possible to have it all? And I ask that because it seems as if a lot of men seem to be able to quote unquote have it all. They're able to have their careers, they're able to have their families. It's not as easy, given the nature of the business, it's not as easy for women to have it all in the same way. What needs to change in the society to allow women to have that balance, to have the career, and also have the family that they want? Is that possible, or is it an impossibility just given the pressures of the industry?
I would like to believe it's possible. Yeah, I hope it's possible. I mean, I have friends who are doing it, but it's even harder on them. They have so much more to juggle and to still try to get those opportunities while having a family at home. I hope it's possible. I don't know how. I don't know how. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I wish I had the answer.
This is a tough question.
Yeah.
Is the sacrifice worth? Is this the sacrifices that you've made to get to this point?
Mhm.
Have they been worth it?
I think so. I think they have been worth it. Um, I can't believe that I've been given the opportunities I've been given, and a lot of it had to do with hard work, but I also had a lot of people advocating for me and opening doors for me and mentoring me and you know um, just supporting me in many different ways. And I'm proud of the career I have. I'm proud to know that I've made my parents proud. That was important to me. That's still important to me.
And your community, it matters. Like what you're doing matters to a lot of people.
Yeah, I've made my community proud, and I think it's great that when I go to a wedding, everybody there is telling me how proud they are and introducing me to their kids so that I can tell them about journalism because they're interested in journalism. I think that's great that they can then look at themselves and see somebody that looks like them, that's from their community, that has had a similar upbringing. That's great. So yeah, it's worth it. That is worth it. I do hope that I can still have all the other things. And yeah, so maybe that all will come together as well. But yeah, it's been worth it.
Well, you have made history, really, because along with Azib, well, the Georges, you are two, of course, Black women whose families, who have roots in the Horn of Africa. You're both representing the public broadcaster. As Azib, of course, is a Washington correspondent for Radio Canada. You are a Washington correspondent for CBC. Is that meaningful to you? Like knowing that the Azib also is there?
Absolutely. When I told my dad I was coming here and that Azeb was also moving here, like she's well known in our community. So he was really excited about that, and I think it's so cool that I get to work with her, and we have an understanding of what growing up Habesha is like, and we can talk, and we just get each other, and she's lovely. She's lovely. I love that
Mhm.
she's here. I think
Yeah,
that it's kind of it's a sisterhood to just be able to see each other and have each other in the same room.
and you used a term there that maybe not everyone is familiar with, Habesha,
Yep.
Habesha. What does that mean?
Ethiopian Eritrean people, we are Habesha people, Tigrayan people, we're Habesha. That's that area of people, we're Habesha. So yeah, in DC there's a big Habesha community here as well. So yeah, that's what that means.
There's another question from the audience. Thank you for sharing your story. I studied journalism, but chose not to pursue it in 2009 after graduating because of the lack of diversity in Canadian newsrooms. What changes have you seen over the last decade? And are you seeing a stronger sense of belonging as a person of color in our newsrooms?
I think it's starting to change. I remember I had asked one of our leaders early on when I was in Toronto. There was a big meeting with some of the leadership, and I'd asked what steps were being taken to ensure that there was more diversity beyond who was in front of the camera and who was in front of the microphone, because that is the diversity you can see. But it's so important that we have that diversity when it comes to the producers and the writers and the other decision makers. You need that same sort of balance. I think, yeah, it is improving. There's more we can absolutely do. Every day I'm seeing more and more people come into this field and be in those positions, which is really, it's encouraging. It's encouraging, but absolutely there's more that we can do. I think all newsrooms could do more.
This is a question that I've wanted to ask all evening, because I think I know the answer. I think I know the answer, but the question is this: what do you do, Makda Ghebreslassie, to relax? Ensure self-care, since you're in the midst of intense places and experiences. So what do you do to relax, Makda? I know the answer to this question. I won't give it away.
Okay, so I have made a decision that I'm going to do a lot of the things that I used to love to do in my 20s and try some of the things I've been interested in it, but haven't had the time to do. And that was something I made that decision in 2020 before everything changed. I started taking a creative writing class in January, and then of course with the pandemic everything changed there. And then since coming here to DC, I started taking an acting class for fun.
I knew you were a thespian. I knew it. I knew it.
It's just for fun. I used to, as I said, like I was in the Vagina Monologues in Sault Ste. Marie. Also in Toronto, I was in the Vagina Monologues and a memory, a monologue, a rant, and a prayer. I did improv in Toronto for a year, was when I was in my 20s, and I loved all that stuff. It's just, it actually does help with being a reporter. Remember, you are on camera, you are telling a story. There are certain things that you can pull from those experiences that are going to help you in this job. So it's great to be career focused, but I think it's important that you also have a life outside of that. You have interests outside of that. You have hobbies. And I put all that on hold for a very, very long time. And so now I'm trying all that stuff out again.
Fantastic. What's your next role, if I can ask?
So it's not a role. It's an acting conservatory. We have different courses every semester.
No, I'm kind of joking. I was wondering if you're going to.
Okay, I thought you meant like.
If you're planning to go to Broadway, is that in the future? No, your next chapter?
No,
I can see it.
Broadway? No, I can't. No, oh, I can't believe we're talking about this.
Okay, here's another question from Morgan Adby, I believe, and she says, "I love Makda's passion when speaking about doing a good job. Question for her: has someone ever tried to take advantage of your internal motivation, maybe by asking too much or failing to protect your safety? And how did you handle it?"
Oh, that's failing to protect my safety. I mean, I think you're going to find, especially you're always going to be asked to do more, right? And at a certain point, you do get more comfortable with listening to your gut, following your own sort of feelings around certain things, and trusting when you have to set boundaries and having a reason to set boundaries. And when it comes to storytelling too, when you're on a story, you might be assigned a story and you go to do it, something just doesn't feel right. And it's important that you listen to that and push back sometimes and ask those questions, and not just, look at the fact that you've got a deadline and you put the story together and you put it to air, because then you will regret it. And I had an experience like that where there was a story, there was an accident. A guy had hit a young girl, I think, or a young child. So it was a pedestrian had been hit. I think we covered it. And then that driver contacted us. I don't know if it was the next day or a couple days later, but he contacted us because he wanted to speak out, and he wanted to share not only his side of what happened, but he wanted to pass on some lessons of the importance of distracted driving, and how you could quickly find yourself in a position like that where all of a sudden you are at the wheel and you are hitting somebody, and he wanted to talk to us. So I've sent out with a camera person. We went back and forth. We get there, and right away I just felt like he just was in a bad state. In talking to him, he was just very, very emotional, obviously for obvious reasons. But I remember feeling like I was concerned for what this was going to do if we aired the story right now as is. I was concerned for his mental health, because I remember that he, just looking around, it was a small room that he lived in, and I felt like I saw some pills on the side. He had said he hadn't been sleeping since this happened. He wasn't talking to anybody about this, and here he was doing this interview, and I questioned whether he truly understood what he was doing, and the consequences of sitting down and doing this interview, and whether he was mentally prepared for what would come. And so we did this interview. I went back to the newsroom and I said, I need a meeting. We need a meeting. I have some concerns about the story. And just give me 1 sec. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. No problem. I'm in conversation with Makda Ghebreslassie. She, of course, is a CBC's correspondent in Washington, D.C. It's a job that she came to in July of 2021. So she's been there now for 6 months. And,
Yep.
And just a reminder, if you have any questions to ask, you can always go into our Q&A section. We'd love to hear your questions. And we're going to go for another couple minutes. It's about 8:45. You're wondering why my hand is like this? There's a light up there. That's why I'm putting my hand up here, to shield the light. Okay, Makda, you were saying.
Yeah, so I come back to the newsroom and we have a meeting about this. And my concern was that I was worried that he didn't have anybody that he was talking to. He was, I believe he was separated at the time. I felt like his mental health was at risk, and that I was worried that he could possibly harm himself once the story would air, and the consequences of having this story air, and whether he was making informed decision coming from a place where he was stable to be able to do this interview. I had some concerns, and so we talked about that, and I was asked, okay, what would alleviate some of those concerns? And I felt like, one, if I could just have a conversation with him and just say, get a better sense of, is there anybody in his life that he could talk to and share some of this with? If I could also talk to him about the fact that there are resources out there for him to reach out to people, and there are different kind of helplines. And the other thing was, I felt like if we had a sense of the condition of the child that he had, there would be more information to go on. So I wanted to find out how the child was. Turns out they were okay in the end. They had left the hospital, and so I had a little bit more information to share with him. And then I checked in. I said, I don't think we should run the story today. Like, let's give this a minute. I think there are some important lessons in it that people can take from this, but let's give it at least a day. And so I reconnected with him, and he told me that he had spoken to a friend, he'd had conversations, and he'd shared some of what was going on. And then I was able to let him know what happened to the person that he hit. And that seemed to give him some sort of sense of relief. And there was a difference in the way that he was talking to me. So at that point, I felt like, okay, I think we're okay to do this story. I feel like he's in a different place, and he really feels passionately that people need to hear this, that it could happen to anybody, that you cannot take your eyes off the road for a minute, and that's all it takes to be put in to have something like this happen. And so we did the story. We didn't identify him. We did it in a way where we weren't identifying him. And he he was pleased with the fact that that we did this, and he felt like it was important, and he didn't regret it. And he was in just a much better state, I felt like. So sometimes it's okay to listen to your gut and say, hang on, I think we need to wait, because what's the harm in waiting and just making sure that we're doing the right thing here.
Yeah, yeah. Makda, this is a question from Jack Moulton, and I remember Jack because he was in my class last year. Wonderful, wonderful person and student. And he says, "Hi, Makda. I can definitely empathize with feeling freaked out about moving to a faraway new place. I just did it a month ago. I'm part of a brand new publication. We don't really have a big legacy outlet reputation to bring with us. In addition, we're all newcomers to the area we are serving. My question to you would be this: how do you go about establishing trust as an individual in a new community? How do you go about establishing productive and or intimate relations within the community, whether it be with vulnerable individuals or bringing bad actors' actions to light?"
It means you have to go out there and be part of the community. That's the only way to do it. You won't get the stories from your desk.
What does that mean though, Makda? You have to go out and be part of the community, because people go out into the community all the time. Like, what does it mean to kind of be implicated in community?
It means you're participating, you're joining different groups. Yeah, if you have certain interests, sign up for groups that highlight those interests. If there's something that is defines a particular community where everybody joins in a certain kind of activity, or be part of that, be part of those festivals and the different events that happen in especially in smaller communities, because then that's how you will meet people. And when you meet people, that's how you will make connections and have sources in different parts of that community, whether it's the city council or the school district or teachers or it's people that are working at the grocery store. All of those connections are important. You have to, if you can make those connections with the people that live in that community, when it comes to telling those stories, you know who to go to, who to connect with, they then know you, they then trust you, they will then come to you with stories and tips. So you have to build those relationships, and it doesn't happen overnight. You're not going to come to town and a week from now have stories coming your way or have people trust you. That won't happen. Sometimes it takes months, sometimes it takes years. It depends on the community you're in. It depends how much you're putting into it. There's so many factors, but it's definitely worth it. And it's good for you to feel like you're part of that community and you're not just, being shipped in just to tell some stories and then shipped out again. You really want to set some roots there.
Mm-hmm. Makda, I was having a conversation with a former Carleton J School student who now is at CBC, and the person was saying that, I'll just say he or she or they are uncomfortable watching themselves. So after doing, they did a hit and they did a story on CBC News, and they couldn't watch it. Now I had my answer for that person. Is it important to watch your work? And if so, why is it important? And do you still watch yourself?
I do, and it is important. I don't watch myself every time. If I'm doing, I don't know, 6 hits in a day, I probably won't watch all 6 hits. But I will watch. I'll watch some of my hits, and I watch the ones where I feel like I didn't quite nail it. And it's important to watch those, even though it's really uncomfortable, and because half the time what ends up happening is it's worse in your head. What you think you did, you didn't really do. And it takes watching it to go, okay, well, it wasn't as bad as I thought. Other times you can see where it went off the rails a little bit. And it's a good way to learn for the next time. You really should watch yourself. That time where in Windsor, when I had the hit that didn't go so well, I did not watch it. And that's a huge regret I have. Huge regret, because I do now wonder, was it as bad as I thought it was in my head? I couldn't bring myself to watch it. So I understand feeling really uncomfortable watching yourself, hearing yourself. It's something that you will get comfortable with over time. The more you do it, the more comfortable you'll be. But yeah, definitely watch yourself, and watch the ones where you don't think you did a good job, and watch the ones where you think you did really well, because there are lessons to learn from that as well.
Just to kind of quickly follow up on that, some would say that you've reached the pinnacle. You are where a lot of correspondents wished they could be in Washington, D.C. right now. Do you still need to improve? Like, what does Makda Ghebreslassie need to improve on? And is that something that is that something that you kind of are paying attention to all the time? Like, do you feel there's still room for improvement, or have you reached the mountaintop?
No, you're never done learning. No, you are never done learning. And and every time you come to a new newsroom, a new job, sometimes you almost feel like you slip back a little bit, because you start to question yourself, and the confidence isn't at the same level that it was when you were in your previous job, because you're learning, you're new, and you start to, there's that uncomfortable stage. So absolutely, you are always learning how to, how to tell a story better, how to put more of yourself into it, how to do it differently, because for me, a lot of times I'm doing my bit and then from the same part of the studio all the time, right? It will look the same. So how do you make it differently? How do you make it more dynamic or exciting? And that's all in the way you deliver it, obviously. You're always learning. You're always learning. And every time you think you're done learning, you will go to a new job, you'll learn more, and then you'll look back at your other stuff, and you'll listen to yourself, and you can see the difference each time. Your voice, your presentation, the way you tell a story, how you write your story, all of that improves with time.
You mentioned that you're trying to become, you're trying to inject yourself somehow into the story. Are you yourself when you're reporting?
I am myself. So for me, one of the best compliments I've ever received, and it's happened a few times, is so the last time it happened, I was ordering dinner, and it was in Toronto. I had a mask on, I had a hoodie or a hat, my hair pulled back, a jacket. There's no way you could know it's me. And I placed my order, and I moved back, and there was a girl beside me, and she said something like, I can't remember exactly what she said, but something to the effect of, oh, you're not on Marketplace today, or you're not doing Marketplace. And for a second, I looked at my jacket, because I thought, am I wearing a CBC jacket, or am I wearing a mark? How could she possibly recognize me? And it's like, and I asked her, I was like, how'd you recognize me? And she said, oh, your voice. I recognized your voice. And that's happened several times. I've been in, a taxi on the phone with a friend, and then I get off, and they have turned around, the drivers turned around and said, you're Makda from CBC, from CBC Radio. And they listened to the radio, and he goes, I recognized your voice. So yes, I am being myself. Absolutely. I think, do you get all of me? Am I as animated on camera all the time as I am right now? No, I think I do pull it back, obviously, a bit.
How come?
Because it can be distracting. Like I'm getting distracted by my hands right now. I'm watching myself, and I'm all over the place with my hands. It can be distracting. You don't want to take away from the story. You want to make sure that people are focused on what you're saying. So you want to make sure you're injecting a part of your personality, but maybe you might not be getting all of it at once in a 2 minutes, because that might be too much. So yeah, there's a balance, but I'm not putting on a reporter voice. You're getting my voice. There's a sense of authority when I'm telling the story, absolutely, but it's me. Yeah.
Speaking of 2 minutes, and we're gonna have to wrap up, because you have to wake up in a couple of hours. So let me just ask this question, though. It's from Jaden Dill. I think it's gonna have to be the last question. How do you determine when to use your gut feeling? How do you balance empathy, caring about the source, with timeliness, trying to be the first to break the story?
We've had times where at CBC, we had the information first, and we didn't go with it. because there were reasons why, the different reasons why sometimes we decide to hold back. There is no rule book on that. Every story is different. Every experience is different. I always think empathy is a good thing. I don't want to lose that. I think that's, you know, that's a little bit of a superpower. To be empathetic is a good thing. You need that, to have that, to be able to connect with the people you're interviewing, and to get the best out of them, to get the story. So it depends. It depends on each story. As for trusting your gut, that I think that's a skill that you improve on over time. You don't have it maybe right away, or you might have a little bit of a inkling, and in the early years maybe you don't listen to it enough, or maybe it's not loud enough, and it gets louder with time, with experience. The longer you do this, the more you move around and have more to rely on, more. So you just end up trusting yourself the further along you go in this career. It's important that you trust yourself.
What's next for you? Can you imagine, you know, like in terms of keeping your eyes on the prize? Is there a new prize? Like you've gotten the prize in being a senior journalist, a respected journalist, you know, a correspondent for the national broadcaster, public broadcaster in this country. Is there anything after this?
I don't know. I mean, it's so funny because you know, you strive to be in these different positions, then you get those jobs, and soon after you get that question right away. It's like, well, what's next for you? And I'm like, I just got here. So I don't know. I mean, never say never. I can't, there's no way that I can predict what's going to happen in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years from now. I don't know. I am open to whatever the universe wants to bring my way. So I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. I mean, will I be back in Toronto in a few years? I'm like, right now I was just going to say, I don't think I would be moving overseas, but who knows? Will I be in journalism? Will I still be in this career 5 years from now? Who's to say? I honestly, anything is possible. Anything is possible. So I'm going to continue enjoying this ride. I'm still new here. There's still so much to learn, and yeah, we'll see where this goes.
Well, Makda, your enthusiasm, your passion for what you do, I think it makes a lot of the people watching tonight feel as if anything is possible. I'm so pleased that you've been able to spend, you know, the last 90 minutes with us. I think for those people who've been in the audience, they've certainly benefited from your wisdom. And I should also say one other thing. You hate talking about yourself. You're telling me, you were telling me before, you actually don't normally do this, but what I can tell you is you're great at it. Like it was fantastic chatting with you for the last 90 minutes.
So much.
Thanks so much, Makda.
And thank you for taking all my calls and putting up with all my nerves. I appreciate that.
You were fantastic, and I hope that you're able to do this, you know, on a more regular basis, because you have so much to offer. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you. And of course, that was Makda Ghebreslassie, the CBC Washington correspondent, who's about to go to bed because she has to wake up at 3:30 in the morning. So you'll be hearing from her tomorrow morning, and that actually, thanks so much, Makda, and that actually brings us to the end of this session. This session is a special event, part of the School of Journalism and Communications Black History Month period program. In 2 weeks from now, actually February 28th, and you should look to this, Howard French, the fine former foreign correspondent for the New York Times. He's also a best-selling author. He teaches at Columbia University, and we're going to be having him join us in 2 weeks from now. And of course, Howard French was a correspondent in Africa for many years. He was also a correspondent in Central America. He was also a correspondent in China and Japan. So he has a wealth of experience, and we're certainly looking forward to chatting with him. So thanks so much for joining us. We hope that you have a great evening. Do spread the word about about this event and the one that we're going to be participating in 2 weeks from now. Have a great evening.